welcome everybody. Sorry for the little bit of a late start. We'll get rolling here, and then get right into it. So, I'm just introducing everybody today and kind of getting things started, and then I'll kick it over to our team. But once again, welcome to today's session. It's which Microsoft Defender option fits your security needs. So, Jamie, if you want to, I think it's turned off for me. So if you want to just navigate to the next one. All right, so just a few notes. If any of you haven't attended any of these meetings yet, I'll call out a few items. The session's being recorded, so it'll be available after. I think we're going to send it out in a day or two, so you'll have access to that. Everyone's going to be muted, obviously, as you can see. So don't raise your hand. Don't try to talk. It's going to fall on deaf ears. Put all your questions and everything into the chat. Jamie, do we want to answer questions kind of throughout, or do we want to save time at the end?
I think I've got some folks on the call that can help answer questions in chat as we go, if they can do it live, and then if there's anything that's left over, we'll handle it at the end.
Awesome, perfect. And then I forgot to introduce myself quickly. I'm Jake Berry. I am director of our inside sales team. So I'm not the important one today. I'll introduce the main event here in a second, but a few more housekeeping items to go over. So if you have any problems, use the chat, or you can email us at our support at JourneyTEAM.com. And then near the end of the session, I'll send out a short survey, like a link. You can just click on it, fill it out quickly. We'd appreciate that. It goes a long way. And then you can also be in a drawing for an Amazon gift card every hour, as well as the big dog at the end is Surface Pro, the new one. So go ahead and go to the next one, please, Jamie. And then just a quick, few snippets about JourneyTEAM. We've been around for about almost 30 years as a company, very successful Microsoft Gold partner. We've grown a ton, well over 130 plus team members, lots of referenceable customers, lots of happy folks, lots of projects completed. So moving up and to the right, things are good. So, and then going through this quickly, these are just some of our awards to call out. We've been Partner of the Year with Microsoft many years, a few years in a row, top places to work. We're in their inner circle where it's kind of that, out of the thousands of partners they have, we're kind of in that knit tight group with them, which is always a good thing. So, and then this just kind of brings everything together about JourneyTEAM. Again, we work across the Microsoft stack. So today's focus is a little more obviously, based on that cloud side, but we work on the ERP side, CRM, cloud, collaboration and content, data and BI, change management, and adoption. And then you can kind of see kind of the honeycombs at the bottom. Microsoft's vision and goals and ideas is to bring that entire Microsoft ecosystem together into one and have it working, as one seamless, piece of everything, bringing it all together. So and we can help you and talk through that. But today's presenters, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Jamie to kind of introduce himself and the team, and then we'll get to the good stuff, the fun stuff. Go for it, Jamie.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. So I'm Jamie Few. I work on the cloud team. I'm a team lead and senior consultant, focus in a lot of different areas. One of my favorite places to nerd out is the security side, which is why we're going to be talking about Defender today. Reese is on with me. I'll probably be doing a lot of the talking, and Reese will be doing, I'll let him introduce himself in a second. He'll probably be handling a lot of the chat questions and things like that come up for me if that helps. But Reese, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, been working with Microsoft for a lot of years. Been through a lot of changes to names of products in Microsoft's world, which is a big focus of this presentation. Is what is Defender? Well, it's different today than it was yesterday. It'll probably be different tomorrow. So I'm excited to get the broad sweep of where all the Defender tools come into play and how they can help you in your work.
Good deal. Thanks, Reese. So just so everybody knows, because I have a face for radio and to keep from distracting myself and other folks, I'm probably going to go off camera while I talk, just so that we can focus on the content and what's being said. And it also keeps me from distracting myself. And just to add a few more details, that I've been working in the Microsoft world for about 20 years, now 25 years, actually, now that I think about it, we were talking about it the other day. Everything from developing all the way up through different things, spent a lot of time with SharePoint. Security has always been one of those things that people have a lot of questions about, even when they're halfway through, or even sometimes what they think fully through with implementing security scenarios, because it's an ever-changing world that we live in from a security perspective. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, looking through the Defender suite of tools that Microsoft has built so far. And there's been a lot of changes here over the last probably 2 years. They've been really trying to solidify this tool set. It started as kind of, we need to throw some things in there. I've watched it over the years from Microsoft Cloud's perspective, throwing things together, and then eventually they decided, I guess, they needed to pull it all together. We had security pieces over in Exchange and security pieces over in its own portal, and security things that were on-prem that were trying to link up, and just all kinds of craziness. So I think they've done a really good job of pulling this together into kind of a solid tool set that begins to be a pretty complete solution. And so I want to set another little bit of a standard up front for you guys to understand me. Been working on Microsoft 25 years. We are a Microsoft partner. Love Microsoft, great company, great group of folks to partner with. But I will say this, and they would admit it if they were being honest and talking to you. Most of the time they put out what would be roughly an 80% solution, primarily because there's no such thing as a 100% solution in the technology world, as we all know. But they look for an 80% solution that then partners like us can come in and help take the rest of the way, or the majority of the way there, right? And or they give you as the end users or the end consumers of their products the tool sets that you need to take it up several more notches. They cannot be all things to all people, but they do their best, and as a result, some things do fall by the wayside. So as we're talking through this, and you have questions, you're like, I tried this and it didn't quite feel that way. If it's been 3 to 6 months since you've messed with any of this stuff, I guarantee you it most likely has changed. I know that the UI itself alone has changed. Things are in different places for me, but the feature sets are constantly evolving. And there's actually a couple of nuggets I'm going to share, more recent nuggets that are related to Defender and security at the end that I'll share that kind of show that they're constantly adding new features and new feature sets to the back ends of these tools. But with that, before we get too terribly into it, I want to talk a little bit at a higher level about security, the landscape, right, of security in the world as we live right now. Cyber attacks increasing. Our attack surfaces with the remote workforce that we have now in a post-pandemic world, which I'll reference several times here, has changed a lot of things we do drastically. It's changed the security scenarios in our environments drastically. We have economic factors that can constrict budgets. We're seeing some of those now. I've heard some customers talking about that. So the challenge is real, that we have to do more with less. And in doing that, we've found some interesting statistics. Some of these were revealed even at Ignite recently, if you watched any of those sessions, that there are 921 password attacks on average per second, right? That's double the frequency of last year. I can vouch that the vast majority of issues I deal with from security breaches are password related, phishing most of the time, but they're password related with any of the customers we have, or people that weren't our customers but had the issue and became our customer coming to us for help. So very interesting statistic. And while I mean, maybe trying to scare you a little bit here, fear is a great motivator. And if you have been sitting on the fence as to whether or not you wanted to implement some of these tools we're going to talk about today, and when and where you would do it, this should be one of your biggest motivators, because your folks are really the only ones that have access to their password. And if they give it away, by the time you find out, it may be too late, which leads to the next stat, right? Which is the average time it takes for an attacker to move laterally is a little less than 2 hours once they get inside your environment with a good set of credentials. So whatever you have on the back end that you're using to detect some kind of threat, you better be able to move very quickly to mitigate or even stop that threat. And if you don't have all your ducks in a row, or if you're using 3 or 4 different multiple third-party tools that are all synced up together, if they're not correlating that information for you, there's a good chance that by the time you figure out what's going on, other bad things have happened, right? For lack of a better term. Another concept that I'm trying to get across to my customers and other folks that I talk to is that identity is the new perimeter, right? There's no longer a hard line for inside or outside the network, especially, like I said, with the post-pandemic remote workforce scenario. Hardware and appliances, they've become more code. They're more virtual right now. Then you have VMs everywhere. And the identity is really the common denominator between most of the different controls you use. Who is this person and what group are they in? We ask that question all the time on the back end of our technology stacks, right? That's a lot of the things. It's half the stuff for CA policies, for conditional access policies and things like that. We want to know what that identity is and where does that identity really belong. That's the common denominator. So it's a huge part of the virtual perimeter, if you will, now. And as I mentioned again, remote work scenarios are making them almost disappear, right? I know that some folks are holding on to or have some physical things, whether it's an on-prem VPN solution or firewalls and stuff like that, and they are necessary to some extent. But even with those, the majority of your folks are probably working outside the wire, as they say, and they are out there where they are. It's open season on their devices and on the information that they're sharing, and we need to be aware of that and put in the tools that help us to uh, correlate all the data streams and then be able to act and remediate when that happens. All this change into the cloud, if you're moving into the cloud, if you're migrating into the cloud, if you're moving new acquisitions that you've bought into your cloud, right? There's chaos there, and that chaos can present oversights and gaps that we forgot to turn this switch on, right? We have never really implemented this feature set, whatever it may be. And the bad guys are looking for those patterns. They're looking to exploit those oversights, and your users' endpoints are really more susceptible than ever. Most of them are in their houses on an open type Wi-Fi scenario in a lot of cases, or they're out at the coffee shop. They're no longer is a requirement they come into the office to be able to work on their device. Mobile devices are becoming a massive tool for a lot of folks. We have some customers where half their workforce doesn't even really touch a laptop. They just use their phones to check email and do some things like that, which means that that phone is their primary link to the company and to the company's information and data. It's also one of the biggest issues that you're going to find is as an open exploit there, right? So attackers are trying to stay ahead of learning curves while we're trying to educate our folks about new things like MFA has not been a standard over the last 10 years, but it's becoming the standard in the last 2 or 3, 5 years. And people are becoming used to that, and it's a good thing. But in an effort to stay ahead of that, we'll talk about in a minute some other really creative ways the bad guys are trying to get through that. And that lack of knowledge or training for your end users can create one of, if not the largest security gap in your environment. I know when I've worked in the past with some DoD stuff with the Marine Corps and the IRS, the big thing we were trained on all the time, we have regular trainings you have to take when you're working with those folks, is the insider threat. And it wasn't always a malicious insider. Most of the time, it's an accidental threat from an insider who just did something wrong by accident or didn't know to do it a certain way. So making sure that you've put in the controls that keep your content data and users and their identities safe is important. And if it can train them along the way with some information, which some of the Defender tools will do, it helps them to begin to learn how to work inside of the environment. And as you do custom policies and things like that, it can help teach them how your company or your organization implements those security pieces. So it's a very important factor that I think a lot of folks leave out, is making sure that your folks are up to date on security threats and how and why you're doing certain things that might make them click an extra time or two, and the importance of that is to the organization to keep your information and your content and your data safe. All that to say, right, the boundaries have widened. We have more things in more domains um, across various pieces of information, and data points and endpoints are out there all over the place. The signals that come in from those are massive and almost not humanly possible to really chase down in any way, shape, form, or fashion. The number of the siloed information can lead to not knowing where to start, and in addition to that, what the root cause and where's it even coming from, right? So, and those various pieces, there are third-party systems sometimes we implement, and while they can be effective in their domain, like a Mimecast or a Proofpoint for email, for example, right? They're not easily correlated with other third-party data or with data inside of your M365 cloud scenario, because it doesn't always give you a single pane of glass to be able to tell what's going on. And then there are times when you don't even know, once you've solved the threat, did you snuff all of the threats? Did they actually jump across from the data scenario back to identity? What's the full depth and breadth of the threat that we've just tried to remediate, right? And so with all that, we need to be able to combine those signals across those domains, whether it's identity to the endpoints to the applications, we need to be able to correlate that and create a story, to be able to tell a story so that we can follow from beginning to end exactly what's going on and what's happened. And so if we can map all those into an information system that we could see all the disparate alerts and the disparate signals to get it more cohesive for us, then we can begin to change the real issue. And all of that really brings us to the question, what is Microsoft Defender, right? So you can see on the screen a lot of things there, but I'm going to give you a little bit more information as you read the screen and listen. It automatically correlates signals and alerts. It provides a consolidated view of an attack chain, the affected assets. It can even provide single-click remediation, and it's all done with fairly easy to read and create workflow scenarios for your folks, right? And while this sounds maybe a little bit like a sales pitch, it's important to understand why and what it's doing on the back end. So Microsoft Defender for Office 365, which was previously, for those that have been around a minute, right, Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, one of the ATP products we used to talk about all the time. Microsoft Defender for Identity was previously Azure Advanced Threat Protection. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint was previously Defender Advanced Threat Protection, or part of the ATP system as well. And then Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps was previously Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS, we used to call it a lot of times for short. And so the purpose of all these is to work together to bring that information up into the Defender portal, which has now become a single pane of glass just in the last little while, to give us a really good view and place to start in remediating threats. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these, and I want you to understand where they fit in your environment and how they work, and what they work with, so that you know which one matters to you, to help answer the question of which Microsoft Defender piece is the right one for your security system. I also have a really good answer for that at the end, which may be cheesy, but we'll see when we get there, right? Defender rolls everything up. It provides what's called extended detection and response. You may have seen it abbreviated XDR in a lot of cases. It's a unified incident queue, so you have incidents you can chase that really are a collection of a ton of things, from alerts and signals, all the way down to the devices and where things might be coming from. It provides automated response to stop attacks. It gives the users the ability to self-heal, the devices sometimes the ability to self-heal. And it can even stop, or it even gives the ability, to hunt across those domains that we were talking about earlier that were previously fairly separate and siloed. In addition to that, we've got threat analytics, where information is being poured in from 47 billion signals that Microsoft gets on a daily basis from security, so that not only are you trying to stop these issues, but Microsoft's got every other tool in their quiver trying to do the same thing, and they're feeding that information into your tenant so that your tenant can take advantage of that knowledge. That's a massive piece of that's often overlooked, and most people don't really understand exactly how important that is. If you're on an island and trying to defend things from a security perspective, you only can see what you can see. But when you have other folks that say, oh, you're about to see this because we saw it yesterday, your system becomes smarter, and the AI begins to pick up on things faster and sooner, so that maybe what happened to other people last week doesn't even bother you this week from a security perspective, which is a really important piece to remember. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 also includes what many people used to call, it still is actually, Exchange Online Protection, but it's kind of rolled up into Defender for Office 365. We just mean that when we say that now, it's all included. And it's all integrated for an end-to-end protection around email and attachments, which is one of the biggest, or at least most trafficked areas of where bad stuff tends to come from, whether it's malware or nefarious links that people are clicking on and those types of things. We have safe links and safe attachments inside of EOP. There's all kinds of things that protect not just Exchange and Mail, but Teams and SharePoint as well from the collaboration side. There's Defender for Identity, which gathers signals from servers. It's a lot of your on-prem stuff. It can gather signals from ADFS. It can gather signals from Active Directory domain services on-prem, right, to protect the hybrid identity environment. So if you have a hybrid identity environment, we are syncing information up from AD on-prem up into the cloud, and you're living in that space, which is a perfectly fine space to live in. you need to be paying attention to Defender for Identity and what it can do for you, because it begins to roll a lot of the signals that would previously be separated on-prem into the cloud so that you've got all of that information in one space, where hopefully you're beginning to solidify your identity up in Azure AD, which gives you even more tools, which we're going to talk about here as we go through the rest of these. Again, may not apply to everyone, but if you're in a hybrid identity state, that's an important tool you need to be paying attention to. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint gathers signals from and protects devices that are used by your organization, whether it's a Windows 10 machine. You can also work with iOS and Android. For those that haven't implemented that and don't know, it's very capable of doing plenty of stuff to prevent things there. This piece does imply some more configuration and features like Intune and endpoint protection, which are not necessarily part of the Defender tool set. But when you combine those, it's very difficult to beat that device management story. And if you add in things like autopilot for easy and secure device deployment that automatically begins to roll devices right into the Defender tool set the minute folks log into them, pretty much that set right there, I would argue, is worth almost every penny though of the licensing that you pay for Microsoft Defender. The next one, Microsoft Cloud App Security, great tool. It's actually again formerly called Cloud App Security, which it says in my old picture here, but it's Defender for Cloud Apps now, and that is a true CASB. It's a cloud app security broker, and it gathers signals from your organization's use of cloud apps, and it protects the data that's going to flow between those, whether it's the environment and the apps, and that includes both sanctioned and unsanctioned apps, right? The sanctioned apps being apps that you guys have deployed into your environment, said users, you can use this, and unsanctioned apps, which users may have figured out how to get into the system, or maybe you don't have it locked down enough and they're able to do whatever they want. This can give you the ability to at least see that information. And if there are security threats, it can act on those. And it gives you tools to gather very interesting scenarios like impossible travel type things. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Impossible travel and all these great little policies that are even built in right out of the box. And it can even remediate some of those issues automatically before they become full-on problems in your environment. Last but not least, and not really in the Defender piece, is Azure AD Identity Protection. This evaluates risk data from billions of sign-in attempts, and Microsoft uses that data to evaluate the risk of each sign-in in your environment. This goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with that threat analytics. Microsoft's bringing everything that they see from across the spectrum of what they have access to and purview to use one of their other tool names. And they use that to help strengthen your environment so that you're not on an island. You at least have bridges so that people can run across those bridges and warn you of things. People being the technology in the background and the AI, right? And so this data is used by Azure AD to allow and prevent account access. And it sometimes can depend on how conditional access policies are configured, but something that you definitely need to be looking into is how to properly configure Azure AD Identity Protection, as it is really kind of a gateway that you get to or get through, I should say, before you even hit the Defender piece in most of the tool sets. It is licensed separately from Microsoft 365 Defender, and it's important to know that that's included with Azure Active Directory Premium P2. That is what is required for Azure AD Identity Protection's full suite. And it is different than the Defender licensing, which we'll talk about Defender licensing here in just a few minutes. So we've talked about the tool set. Let's talk about the scenario, right? A typical attack starts with a phishing email. I've seen that a ton lately. Matter of fact, I'm helping one customer right now strengthen one tenant. We're hardening one tenant with a lot of security stuff that's in the Defender tool set. And while we were doing that, he messaged me one day and said that another tenant, which was not in scope for the work we were doing, had been breached, and they did not have the things we were putting in place, and that was one of the reasons why. And it was a Microsoft tenant, but the user had done some stuff with phishing that allowed the bad guys to get in the door. But one typical scenario here is that a user gets a phishing email and they do something that allows it to install malware on an endpoint. That malware ends up stealing the credentials, right? Which then the attacker uses to access resources on other endpoints or on-premises applications or cloud services. Or as we're going to talk about in a minute, they might even register their own device in the tenant using those credentials, which is a new vector we're seeing in a lot of cases, right? individual security solutions that focus on only one domain being email or one domain being identity, right? If you've got a tool that just focuses on one of those, or several tools that focus on one of those but are not talking to each other in a very consistent way and cohesive way, it may only alert or remediate a portion of the attack, but you will likely miss other parts of that attack's operations. It'll put your organization at risk. So just understand that when you add multiple tool sets together, if you don't have all of your ducks in a row and they're disparate tools, a Mimecast or Proofpoint combined with an Okta and things, great tools in and of themselves. I'm not knocking those tools at all. They are great tools, but it does require extra work to plumb all those together and make sure they're talking cleanly, that you're seeing the full picture, and may require a little extra work on your part gathering that. But as we look at this picture on the screen and we see phishing, the phishing email that comes in, Exchange Online Protection, which is part of the Defender for Office 365 feature, could detect that phishing email and use mail flow rules, also sometimes called transport rules, right, to make certain that that mail never arrives in the box. Defender for Office 365 with safe attachments could test that attachment and determine if it's harmful, so that the mail that arrives is either not actionable, or that if it arrives, the mail doesn't even come at all. If it shows up with the mail, it doesn't even show up in the box at all, to prevent a user from accidentally clicking on it. Defender for Endpoint can manage the devices that are connected to the corporate network to detect said malware and begin cleaning it off of every device as soon as it shows up. And if the exploit is determined soon enough, or if some of those threat analytics are coming in from Microsoft, Defender for Endpoint may even prevent it from ever installing in the first place, even if the user clicks OK, right? Defender for Identity, as you move down to the right, could take note of sudden account changes and privilege escalation, high-risk lateral movements, right? It can also report on exploited identity issues like unconstrained Kerberos delegation, so that those can be surfaced up and acted upon by your security team. Defender for Cloud Apps notices anomalous behavior like impossible travel, I mentioned earlier, credential access, unusual download and file share and mail forwarding activity. All of those can be reported up into the Defender portal so that we can see the full picture of what's going on here and begin remediating things as fast as possible to prevent that user from moving laterally or from more systems becoming infected, for example, right? So a very nice set of tools that once configured and in place and licensed properly does a lot for you. So let's take a quick look at them. And to make this a little easier, rather than having to switch back and forth between a browser and everything else, I've just done some screenshots. If you have an M365 tenant, even without the full licensing scenario, Defender is out there taking inventory of the different things that are going on in your tenant. And you can go take a look at some of these. And there's even a way to implement a trial of all of this stuff in your production environment without affecting the day-to-day work that's going on there. So let's take a look at what it looks like once you're in the Defender portal for those that haven't been there. And if you have, it may be new to you because they've been refreshing it lately. It's got a lot of new things there. The first place you start most of the time in the Defender portal will be with incidents. And as I mentioned previously, an incident is a roll-up of a whole bunch of things that are connected to each other, or at least the AI believes they are, to give you a single pane of glass to look at the story of the risk. What is going on with this threat? Where is it coming from? How many things could possibly be affected? And so in the incidents list, you'll see them drawn out like this, and you'll see a severity code is already configured to start helping you determine what's the first thing you should look at, what's more important than another. So it's a great place to start with incidents. There are other things you can jump straight to, whether you want to talk about like advanced hunting with querying, which we'll talk about here in a second. But incidents are the best place to start. And as you begin to tweak and grow into this feature set, you'll have a lot of policies and things in place that begin to really hone the tool for you, especially for your organization and the policies that you put in place. Once you jump into an incident, there is a ton of information that's presented to you, right? And it's all drawn from a lot of different places. You don't have to jump between tools. You don't have to jump between screens. Right here off the bat, you can see all of the impacted assets and the associated risk levels, 3 affected devices, 2 affected users, et cetera, et cetera. All pieces of evidence and remediation status there at the bottom, there's 57 different things that it's correlating to understand this threat. There are top alerts and other things that are important on the left as well. And you can even see the progress of the attack through stages, according to the MITRE attack categories. And from here, you can dig into any one of these. You can drill down to a lot of these things will be clickable, and you can drill into one of the biggest things that a lot of folks do, especially if you get into really detailed searches trying to understand either what's going on or what needs to be done to remediate, is jumping into the hunting scenario. There's a Go Hunt button in many places inside a Defender, which allows you to go really deep into seeing what's going on and what particular things are affected. And here's one, for example, from the mailbox view. When we're looking at mailboxes across this incident, at the top, you'll notice the multi-stage incident piece has a summary, alerts. There are 14 alerts. There's 2 devices, 2 mailboxes in this case, 3 investigations ongoing. But from any one of those, there's most of the time a Go Hunt button. And this Go Hunt button is contextual. There's another one that shows up with in processes and in various places. You can search straight from here while you're looking at processes. You can go straight while you're looking at the devices that are affected and start hunting for related events right there. And when you do that, what shows up is it takes you to the advanced hunting interface, where it puts a contextual query from what you clicked into the query window and lets you run that immediately to begin getting more details. You can also customize this query and make it work the way you need it to work to see what you need to see, whether it's changing dates and times about when this might have happened, what the timestamps were on these events. And once you get what you need, a lot of times you can take these queries, save them out, and create your own custom workbooks and playbooks, so that in the future, when you need to do something, you've got queries that can already be run very quickly to understand what's going on. Super powerful tool set. So again, in keeping from jumping back and forth to browsers, I just again grab some screenshots here to show you what we're talking about in the Defender portal. This is a screenshot of one right out of my demo tenant, fresh demo tenant I just spun up the other day. And you'll notice on the top left, that's where your incidents are. So if you're in you may be following along right now while I'm giving the presentation. You can go look and see if there are any incidents showing up in your environment. The advanced hunting, you can jump straight into that KQL query scenario right there on the top left and begin to see what's going on. The main homepage, as you see right there, is a large dashboard that just gives you a lot of information quickly so that you can jump and dig in to various pieces. But Microsoft's began rolling everything from various different portals into this one. So in addition to that, if you scroll down the navigation in your Defender portal on the left, you'll see that they've pulled a lot of the Exchange Admin Center security tools into the left-hand side over here under email and collaboration. Excuse me. And this even includes those things that we used to set up over there under policies and rules. You can go work on the malware and spam policies that you need. But in addition to that, there's an attack simulation tool, which I think most people overlook this a lot. Super helpful tool as you begin to, as we talked about earlier, train and teach your end users what to do and what not to do and what to expect. And you would much rather be in control of that. And this type of feature is sometimes an extra cost than some third-party tools. Some third-party tools don't even have it, but it's built in right here for you, and it allows you to control it, create your own payloads, and for testing and things like that. I know that we use it inside of JourneyTEAM, and they have a great time trying to catch us to see if we're going to click on the thing that we shouldn't click on. So very helpful tool in educating your folks as you begin to implement more and more of these tools. And all this has been rolled out of Exchange Admin Center and over here into the Defender portal. There's also the Microsoft or Defender for Cloud Apps, as I say, Cloud App Security. It's the Defender for Cloud Apps is where you can discover, and you can see right here, just out of my my demo tenant, there's a lot of pre-populated information so that you can kind of see what it would look like. It discovers applications that are being used by different users in your environment. Again, whether they're applications you've deployed or that the users deployed. And this allows you to see what you might need to take control of and what you might need to disallow going forward. And there's a lot of data here that you can go through in the discovery piece. And there's even policy management. A lot of these, as I mentioned earlier, come out of the box with impossible travel and ransomware activity and risky sign-in. These policies all come out of the box from Microsoft, and they're already pretty fine-tuned to start sending signals into Defender Portal from the get-go. But you can go build your own as you need to, as you find applications, or if you have custom apps that you're using or deploying to customers in a B2C scenario. You can monitor a lot of that here. And this is a great tool set for that. It's really, really fancy tool. I'm glad they pulled this in. It, as a separate tool previously, while it was great, it was sometimes difficult to get to and people didn't fully understand it, but this begins to pull it all together in the Defender portal. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up one of my favorite pieces because I don't know it all. My wife constantly reminds me I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I have to constantly be learning, and there's a ton of stuff inside the Defender toolset to know. They've created a learning hub right in here, and it's probably there's so much stuff in here. It's one of the best learning scenarios I've ever seen Microsoft deploy inside of one of its tool sets. I've even got 2 slides in here just to show you it. If you scroll down, it just keeps going. And these are videos, these are documentation. There are even interactive guided tours of how to do certain things, whether it's investigations or remediation or how to configure some best practices settings inside of the things inside the tool sets that you have here. An absolute golden resource inside of the is just right there inside of the hub that you can get to. I also wanted to call out right below that there's a trials section. There's a new tool that they're bringing out called Defender Vulnerability Management. I'm still trying to understand what this is, but based on their information, they say it's a new service that attempts to minimize your cyber risk using real-time asset discovery and continuous risk-based assessment and prioritization, and it has built-in remediation tools. It actually includes, from what I was reading, a lot of the vulnerability management capabilities and things inside of Defender for Endpoint, and it adds some new capabilities to enhance your ability to prioritize and remediate the big risks. So what I'm interested to see, because I don't want to leave it out, last but not least, is the Endpoint Security Microsoft Defender for Endpoint portal, which is still over there in Endpoint Security. They haven't pulled this into Defender yet. I think they're working on it. Or they may be getting ready to use that Defender vulnerability management tool. They may be combining this together to create a new tool that's going to go into Defender and give you kind of a bubbled up version or view, if you will, of all the Defender for Endpoint pieces. So that's just a new piece that I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. It's a trial that's out there. You can go turn it on, start using it as a trial. But it's an interesting tool that, as you can see, they're constantly adding new tool sets and new information. With all of the data they're getting on the back end, they can begin to build, actually quite rather quickly, some new tools that help us get even more visibility into the potential threats. So I know the biggest question that most people have when we talk about all these tool sets with our customers is, you know, what license do I need? How do I get into it? Which is probably the toughest question in almost everything at Microsoft, right? What licensing is required? It's always a challenge. This is what's required to get it. If you have an E5, you've already got it. Everything's there. Go to town, start configuring it. Give us a call. We'll help you out. Right? If you've got an E3 with an E3 Microsoft 365 E5 security add-on, you've got it. If you've got the E3 with the Enterprise Mobility and Security E5 add-on, you've got it. Point right here. New scenario and licensing, just to make sure you folks are aware, the E5 security add-on and the E5 Enterprise Mobility and Security add-on are different slightly, but they are different, and it's notable to know that, right? So it's good that you know that. So I want to make sure I call that out. But even you could buy just Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Identity and bolt those onto your licenses if you needed to. So there's a lot of good stuff here. As far as the ability to get into it. They've given you plenty of doorways to get into the Defender world. And as I mentioned earlier, even without the licensing, a lot of the signals and alerts are already going to be collected into the Defender toolset and the Defender portal for you to at least be able to see. And there's going to be some level of functionality there. But to get the full feature set, you need these types of licenses here that we've got. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, there is the ability to implement a Microsoft trial. And so I want to, or a trial for this, if you will. And so I wanted to, I'll put this link out here at the end. I'll have to go grab it out of my toolset and throw it at the end of the meeting when we do some sum ups. But there is an eval overview where you can go turn on a lot of the Defender tools in a trial state on the back of your existing tenant and begin to use these things or begin to explore these things and how they would work inside of your environment. So I want to make sure you're aware of that, and I'll put that link out there. So that's pretty much it for the Defender toolset that we talked through. We'll get to answering the question in a minute, but in the total view of everything that is security, I wanted to drop a few nuggets out here of some recent stuff that I've become aware of that I thought was interesting to me, and as a result may be interesting to you. And I'll make sure these links are provided either in the chat or with the download of the presentation. Forensic artifacts in Office 365 and where to find them. This Community Hub article is a really good deep dive into audit logging and where all the logs live and how they work. I've grabbed some screenshots here just to show you. There's a really good diagram here that helps people to see and understand how and where the logging is going on, which are all of the signals and things that are being used by the Defender toolset, right? It's very important to understand where that's coming from, especially if you start getting into serious log diving and hunting scenarios, even with KQL, right? It's important to know where all that's coming from. Really good resource. I'll make sure that link's out there for you guys. The second article talks about defending your users from MFA fatigue attacks. This is a new thing I talked about a minute ago. Hey, everybody, get MFA. We've been preaching it for years now, it feels like. Once you get MFA in there, everybody's like, yeah, I got MFA. I have the application on my phone, and I just have to click approve. Well, what they found is that end users sometimes accidentally click approve when it wasn't them because they think it might be a back-end service that they're working with that just needs their credentials. What they've also found is that the bad guys have started to create scenarios with fatigue attacks. Everybody needs to understand the way this works. When you have a username and a password, and that is presented to M365, and MFA is in play, it is not until the credentials, the username and password are presented that MFA is triggered. So that means if an MFA prompt is triggered on an account, whoever triggered that has both the username and the password. So what the bad guys will do is if they can get hold of the username and they finally do get the password, they will begin to hammer the users that have MFA over and over and over and over and over again until the users accidentally hit approve or just hit approve trying to get it to go away because they think it's some back-end piece that's going on or something like that. And as that happens, then the user's in, the user goes and starts to begin to change things on the back end so that they have control of the account. One of the best ways, and my boss and colleague Eric Roth will be so excited when I tell you guys this, one of the best ways to prevent this is passwordless authentication inside of MFA. It's a great tool set you can turn on and enable for your users, and then they can subscribe to it as they wish within the authenticator tool. But that 2-digit approval piece that shows where the thing's coming from on the map, all those tools help the user not to make the mistake of hitting approve, and then gives them, obviously, as it always has, the ability to say, hey, no, this is not me, and flag it for some scenarios that can be taken to remediate their account. So be aware that's happening. Again, we all created MFA thinking we're solving a problem. The bad guys are finding out new ways to exploit that and outsmart the users. So it's constantly changing. The third article, really just a nerd article for me. It's a total deep dive in how attacks happen and gives a lot of detail. Again, I'll make sure these links are available for you, but it even gives you some great little hunting queries in that particular article. Lastly, that fourth one I had was talking about one of the new endpoint manager pieces that's come out that's called enrollment notifications. Another attack vector that we've seen is once a bad actor has credentials, they can actually go in and register another device in the environment and then operate as more or less a first-class citizen trying to gain more access and do lateral moves and things like that. And so what's going to happen here is enrollment notifications will be able to prompt the end user to verify the enrollment of the device and then report it if it's not them, if it's suspect, allowing the administration staff the security staff to be able to go take care of that scenario and possibly even remediate the identity of the user, change password, start requiring MFA. All of this is improvements that they're constantly putting in place that you're going to need the signals, right, of all of the Defender tools and things like Intune and so forth to be able to understand and make happen. So remember, once you get outside of the lane of Defender and you're bringing in third-party tools, sometimes you actually could be going backwards in your ability to quickly handle and quickly remediate solutions. Not opposed to them, just understand that when you use them, what comes with that, the baggage that comes with that scenario, right? So all of this shows and hopefully proves they're constantly staying up with this. This was in September. They just added this new feature. So really, really cool piece worth looking at is those enrollment notifications coming with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So let's answer the question. Which Microsoft Defender option fits your security needs? Hopefully, you've been taking inventory of what you have as I've been talking, and you kind of know which ones you need to go look at first. But in the end, all that apply is the answer. It's super cheesy, right? But sometimes the obvious answer is the right one. Once you license the Defender toolset, you've got it all. You might as well go configure it all and use it all and put it to work. Once it's in place and it's working, the additional cost for licensing Defender is very minimal compared to the damage that it can help avoid and the reduction even in the workload on your security staff, right? I know that, again, there are those out there that love their third-party tools, and you may even be stuck in those tools from a licensing scenario, right? Microsoft claims that their customers who implement these tools can see savings of up to 60%. I'm not sure if that savings is additional licensing or even less time spent managing the security issues. But even if they are half right, at 30% savings, nothing to sneeze at, right? And in a world where financial factors are constantly controlling what we can do as a business, as an organization, and in IT itself, that's an important factor to think about, right? So that said, JourneyTEAM, we would love to help you better secure your Microsoft 365 environment. I would ask you to please reach out to your account manager if you're interested in any of the Defender toolset and need some help with that, want to talk about that, want to strategize how to implement the best way to implement for your organization, because everybody's different. And as far as the licensing scenarios go, again, reach out to your account manager. They can work with you on the licensing piece to get you going. So with that, I'm done. And I think if we have any questions that haven't been answered in the chat, we could bring those up now. So I'll ask Reese if he's got any questions, and I'll turn it back over to Jake as well.
Yep. Thanks, Jamie. And then everyone, I've just hit copy and pasted in the chat the survey. So if everyone could take a few minutes to fill that out, even while we're waiting for questions to trickle in. And it sounds like Drew had a question and Reese answered it. But if there's more context around that, please let us know, Drew.
Cool. So
and then,
if you guys are paying attention to the chat, you'll see that answer over there. I'm going to go grab some of these links and throw them in the chat for you guys as well.
Yep. And we'll wait and hang on for a few minutes for everyone to think of some questions or throw them in the chat.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about Drew's question. Drew, it's an interesting area with the Azure VMs and where does Defender sit in the space. The chat message I just posted is highlighting the fact that treating the environments separately from a tooling standpoint makes sense to Microsoft today. So they're building specific tools around email. They're building specific tools around blob storage. How do you monitor, network resources? And what we're learning is and this is what Jamie was highlighting at the beginning of this, is that Microsoft has detected and is aggregating a lot of data around the insecurity in one area can lead to big breaches in other areas. And the idea that a username password combo, especially on like a service account, where that service account can't do MFA, so let's exclude it from a policy. Let's kind of reuse a password that we use for our internal IT tools. Those can leave big security gaps. And so monitoring for that type of activity in M365 can help protect resources in Azure, and vice versa. If you're detecting anomalous behavior in your Azure subscriptions, go look at that account use in M365 or Azure AD sign-ons. And we've seen examples where it's not a password spray, it's not a brute force, it's a phishing attempt that's successful on an admin password, and then that can traverse into the Azure subscriptions and cause damage. So hopefully that was interesting. And then let's see if we got any more questions here.
I replied to Dan. We'll have the recording out in the next day or two, I believe, right, Jake?
Yep. We were told if you fill out the survey, I believe you automatically get the recordings sent to you.
And Gordon, the SOC and SIEM services, that's a great question. I've seen internal SOC and SIEM build outs using the Azure tooling, and it works really well when you have a team to do that, knowing that you may not have a team of 24/7 knock sock to evaluate your SIEM all the time. There are third-party services to do that. The only things that I've been involved in is internal, so I don't have any experience there. Jamie, have you dealt with a third party, or do JourneyTEAM have any connections there?
With third
So
party,
it's evaluating all the collected data and the SIEM notifications around different events.
from a third party tool?
Yeah, so Gordon's just asking for small businesses or smaller than enterprise orgs. Like how do you deal with the flurry of events that come into all these different tooling dashboards?
So part of that, real quick, it's been sold like a limousine. You don't want to ride, but you still want the big car. Yeah, I get it. That makes total sense, and love the analogy. That's awesome. So yeah, like I said, without any of the licensing, a lot of these signals are already in there, and you do have some ability to go deal with some of those, at least to see what's going on and know where you need to go remediate. To be honest with you, I haven't done a lot where Defender wasn't licensed. Like I said, Microsoft tells you that there's things in there. I need to probably go test that out in a demo tenant without it being licensed and see exactly what signals you can get. So there are some features and things in place without that. There, as far as a small business scenario, like if you're doing just the business premium licensing kind of thing, you can simply just bolt on the Defender piece, I believe, and get some more of that. You don't necessarily have to have an enterprise license. Don't quote me on that. I would ask you to check with your account manager who can verify that for sure. Because most of the folks that are going to this level and dealing with this many signals have a larger license set, if that helps. I know that probably doesn't answer your question the way you wanted to answer, Gordon, but the challenge here is in the security world, regardless of your size of business, the bad guys don't care, for lack of a better term. They don't care if you're driving a limousine or a Pinto. What they want is what's inside, and if they think they can get in, they will get in. And so even a small business has to start thinking like an enterprise level business from a security perspective. Some of those tools come out of the box and are fairly easy to configure. If you get up to an Azure ADP2, for example, and I was talking about the Azure identity piece where we can turn on user sign-in risk and risky sign-ins. Those types of things are great tools in addition with good CA policies and some good malware scenarios and spam scenarios to help configure all of those things to begin automatically solving your problems before they even happen.
Without going into like somebody actively watching all the dashboards and all the alerts, Gordon, your best offense is a good offense. I mean, best offense is a good defense. So getting the conditional access policies in place and requiring MFA for all accounts and trying to trim off any exclusions that you have and blocking legacy protocols, just really getting that front door as secure as possible is going to be the best way to limit the number of alerts and things you have to dig into and investigate.
And we help people out, a lot of folks, a lot of times do that, right? We've worked with a lot of, you mentioned lawyers, legal companies and things like that, where the majority of folks are not terribly technical and they also don't have folks on staff to sit and monitor this type of thing. That's really kind of the point of Defender, is that you don't have to sit and watch it. You only put in alerts. You can customize, you can suppress alerts in Defender. There are things that come through that are false positives, and there's ways to turn those off so that you're not getting those alerts. But the incidents, rather than getting 43,000 alerts on all the different things that are going on in your system, what it's going to do is roll those up into a handful of incidents and prioritize those so that you know which one to chase. So rather than chasing 40,000 things, you've got 6 things to look at, right? And whether you have the time to do that or not, we might be able to even handle that with some of our support scenarios where we could come in. That sounds like a sales guy, because I'm not, but we do have the ability, or could have the ability, to get into your tenant and check on a weekly basis and look at your incidents or be on the alert system, alert notification list when there's an incident that needs some responding to. So we can monitor some of that, help you with some of that. So something else again to talk to your account manager about. And no, we don't do SOC typically as a service, but that's a great idea. Any other questions? All right. Does everybody have the survey link? We do appreciate your feedback. You can tell them that I was terrible, but the content was good. No problem with that. You know, no feelings hurt here. I just I've always enjoyed trying to explain tech to everyone. I didn't do too many analogies today, which is kind of rare. I do a lot of analogies usually, but I hope everybody got something out of this. I hope it helped you to begin to kind of clarify your vision of what Defender is and how you could use those tool sets in your environment or not use them. Sometimes that may be a little overkill, as we've been discussing, and you may need just some more of the basic stuff that comes out of the other security tool sets we have inside of the Microsoft 365 stack. But I believe it's a great tool set that can help you protect yourself. I used to kind of put my head in the sand about security stuff. Years ago, I used to be a developer, and my whole job was to actually make security folks work for a living by creating holes and stuff. But as I've gotten further along in my career and the security piece has become so prevalent, it's just something you have to understand, you have to pay attention to, because it's not a question of if you will get breached. It's a question of when you will get breached. Because again, users can be your largest security gap. So make sure you're teaching and training them. Make sure you've got the technology tools in place to teach and train them and to prevent them from shooting themselves and you in the foot. So with that, I'm done. Hope you understand which Defender tool fits your security needs, and we'll talk to you soon. Jake, back to you.
And thanks everybody. The link is in there, peppered with everything else. So let us know if you don't see it. It's in there a few times, but we appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for joining this session. And thanks, Jamie and team, and everyone else. Other than that, have a good day, and we look forward to seeing you in some others.